He's going to tell you how to do just that. Thanks.
Hey, everybody. As just introduced, I'm going to talk about a game I built in my spare time. The game is called Everybody Edits. But before we go into that, I would like to talk a little bit about who I am and how what's my background and how this came about. Very shortly, I'm a founder of a company called ODPY, and nobody of you probably know that, but we have a bunch of different properties in the casual gaming space. We have an end-user portal called Nonoba. We have a paid casual gaming club called Dr. Puzzle. And then we have a company called Player.io, which is our news property. And I'm going to talk very shortly on Player.io because it's heavily involved with Everybody Edits. Basically, it's building blocks for your games, for Flash, for Unity 3D or .NET. So if you're developing in these games, you can use Player.io for your backend infrastructure, basically. The basic premise is if this is your casual social game, you'll typically use 40% of your time building backend infrastructure. And our goal is to take those 40% and make them 10%. So that's where I'm coming from. That's what I do when I'm at work. I work at this platform, and I primarily actually do Flash there. I'm a Flash guy, Flash developer. What we're here to talk about today, however, is a game called Everybody Edits. It's built in Flash. It's a very classical Flash game. It's openly distributed. It's I think we counted it down. It's like on 10,000 different portals around the world now. This is the first thing, if you're a user playing the game, this is the first thing you're going to see coming to the game. It's the lobby of the game. You have two types of worlds. You have open worlds, and you have protected worlds. And in open worlds, everybody can edit everything. That's the basic premise of the game. It's a 2D platform game, and everybody can edit. I'm just going to skip here. So this is an open world. It's pure chaotic. Everybody is jumping around, editing the world. And if you look in the bottom right corner, there's a minimap basically showing how the entire level looks right now. So very chaotic in the open rooms, but a lot of people tend to really like this. Then there is a closed room, which is a lot less chaotic. There's a limited amount of people who can edit one of these worlds, which means that people are actually building real game experiences. And what we have is we have people sitting down, constantly building new games that other people can play. So what Everybody Edits essentially is a multiplayer level editor and a multiplayer environment where people can build games for each other. There's no defined purpose of the game. It's just people having fun with this. If you're a registered member, this is what you're going to see. You're going to have your saved worlds. You're going to have. I'm a beta member, so I have special rooms where I can play in. But I'm going to get into that later. The game has. Monetizes with microtransactions. So we basically have additional things you can buy. Specifically, we have a 16 times 16 pixel avatar system, and it might sound strange, but we found that's more than enough for people actually to really engage into this. You can pay with PayPal, you can pay with Super Rewards, and you can pay with Get Gambit. We also have a direct Kongregate integration, so if you play the game on Kongregate, you can use Kongregate credits to pay. So basic stats on the game. It has 250,000 registered users. In the total lifetime of the game, which is about 7 months, it's been played 11.2 million individual times or individual game sessions. And in those game sessions, people have joined a world 33.5 million times. The average session time in a game for a user of the 11.2 million is 34.3 minutes. Total revenue of the game to this date is $39,613, and the reason that it's not times 7 months is because we only recently introduced payment into the game. Every day right now, as the game is on the 25th of February, we had around 60,000 concurrent online users in the game every day. The demographics look like this. A subset of the users authenticate with Facebook, so I basically just pulled the demographics directly from Facebook. But it's very male-orientated, and most people are below 18. So it's a very young audience, and it's very male. Yeah. Everybody Edits as a game wasn't really designed. when I started out with the game, I basically built it on top of Play.io. We have this platform, Play.io, and we've been building it for approximately a year now. We went out of beta about 3 months ago, but in that entire period, we have just been adding tools to it until our official release. The first thing we added was a multiplayer SDK, and we needed a test case for this. And that's essentially how everybody else started out. I just needed to sit down and play around with the infrastructure, see that everything was hooked up correctly. So I built a small 2D environment where people could jump in the 2D game together. And this is essentially how it looked. You know, you had some bricks, and you had a red circle representing you, and everything was predefined. So there was no editing. I sent it around to a few friends of mine on MSN and on Skype and whatnot, and the basic feedback was, you really suck at game design. You know, that was what people were telling, you know, and that makes sense, you know. So really quickly, you know, to counter this, I just added the ability for people to edit the world live, and that's and the game went from something where people are, hey, that's fun, you know, can jump around in the same environment. It became something where people, you know, it really took off. Even though I only sent it to my contact list, they sent it to their contact list, and initially there was only one room. You know, there's a limit to how many people you can have into one instance, and that basically just got filled up. And I basically just did firefighting, you know, adding, you know, 2 rooms and auto-sorting people out, because you know, of course, when you have something that becomes popular, you like to extend on it, and this is still inside a single day. So in one day, I sat down, built a small multiplayer thing, added editing, and it basically just took off on itself there. The next day, I decided if this is popular, just from me sending it to my friend, it's probably going to be something that could be turned into a real game. Probably something you can take and make more out of. And I really like making games. That's why I build platforms for games. It's because when everything comes down to it, I really like making my own games, right? So I fixed it up a little bit, added the ability to choose which room you joined, and then I uploaded it to Newgrounds. I kind of like Newgrounds. It's a good place to just test out things, because they have a review system where people can give feedback, and that's basically what I wanted. I think in the first 24 hours it had like 1,000 plays, and a whole lot of reviews. Most of it positive, something like this. Oddly addicting. I couldn't stop stalking the other circles. You know, there was no smiley shot. Perfect time waste. Amazingly addicting. Pointless game, which describes it pretty well. Or a little bit longer here, people giving really, really good feedback, and that was essentially what I wanted out of this. But of course, with unexpected success come unexpected problems. So this was also the kind of reviews I was getting. I've just, you know, hacked together the back end in, I don't know, I probably spent a total of 30 minutes on it. You know, so really, really horrible, and this is the result you get when you actually start, you know, getting traffic on something like that. And I put a lot of games out there. I made probably 20 games in the time I built games. And what happens when you upload a game to the internet, at least a Flash game, is it gets popular for, I don't know, 3-4 days, and then your traffic stops. Then it's over, and you can go on and build your own game or a new game. But everybody else got an initial spike, and then just grew on its own, without doing any special distribution, without talking about it. It basically just had the viral growth, and this was something completely new, something I hadn't seen before. So of course, you know, you're looking at that. I went, there might actually be something more to this game than just a typical Flash game. So I decided to sit down and use some more time on it. The original game here was called Multiplayer Platform World. It wasn't called Everybody Edits. So I decided to, you know, try to make a brand out of it, renamed it Everybody Edits, added a bunch of new features, and re-released it. This is what the first version basically looked like. You had a small bar at the bottom where you can choose what types of bricks you wanted to build. You had the opportunity to choose a smiley to communicate in a very small fashion. And we had one very successful thing I added was gravity modifying arrows. So if you build one of these arrows, you see down in the left corner, and a player hovers over that, they will basically just, the gravity direction will be changed. And basically what happened was that growth continued, and people build more and more in a complex world. And of course, again, it was an unexpected success. So not something we had planned for. Not something we thought would happen with this. Again, it was just a test. But the constant growth of it, and the fact that people kept coming back to it, it makes you think. Is this something that we could take on? Is this something we could do more out of? And this is the primary question, right? Will people pay for something like this? We hadn't a lot of experience with microtransaction before. We built infrastructure for other people doing payments, but we haven't actually never sat down and built our own game with payment. And I'm not a huge backend guy, so me sitting down and building a payment infrastructure is not something I'm gonna do. So I wanted to test, but I wanted to test the easiest way humanly possible. So what I did is I added simple donations. I found one of the services out there doing a button where you can say donate, and added that. And the first day, I made $48. I was really happy about it, actually. It's the first time I made money directly from the users, not from advertisement and not from selling the game to a publisher or anything. This was directly from the users, right? And over the first 2 weeks or something, a month, this is how the revenue looked. $38 initially, and then everybody's probably wondering what's that spike, right? So what happens is a single fan donated $100. I really like the game. So this was like super initial test. At this time, you had the Humble Bundle coming out. There was a fairly large success for the games participating in that program. So I decided, hey man, that might be a model for everybody else. So I decided to expand the model to donation with rewards, basically giving people something for donating, deciding how much they want to donate, and deciding and giving something for them. Unfortunately, that requires me to actually have to save data, which was something I couldn't do. But in Play.io, the platform, we had built a solution called BigDB, which is a simple storage solution for complex objects. So you can have a dynamically typed object in Flash, and you can just basically press save, and it will save, and you can load it again back into the client. So I used that to add the first paid option to everybody else, with 6 more smileys. Allowing people to look special in the game, making them not look like everybody else, right? First day, made $112. So almost twice as good, and over time, fairly decent revenue on this. Of course, again, this is not something that's you can make a living off of, but it was substantially better than just having basic donations, which I think is an interesting point. Of course, seeing that you can get people, and I actually had to sit down. Every time somebody donated, I had to sit down, find that PayPal transaction, and award them the smileys. There was no system for this. Yeah, So again, because I'm not a backend guy, I'm a client-side developer. So, but I wanted to play real payments, especially because Minecraft just got popular, right? And you see Minecraft, they make $1 million in a few days. So I totally wanted to copy that model. So I basically I bribed one of our backend developers to do a PayPal integration for me. Simple PayPal. Nothing special. That's one thing you could buy. You could basically buy. Of course, I wanted the package to be a little bit better than the donation thing. So you got the smileys, you got a few new bricks, you could build a new world, and I added the ability to have one saved world. That was the most requested feature for the game. Being able to create something and save it and load it again in case. Up until then, when you build something and the last person exited that room, your creation would be gone. So people really wanted this, And this is the result of it. We made $300-something the first day, and from a revenue perspective, this was a lot better. The model was simple. It cost $10 to be participate in the beta program, like Minecraft Alpha. Totally against stealing ideas. And if you segregate the data up into segments, you have basic donations, you have donations with a reward, and then you have something where people are efficiently buying something for a fixed price. The transaction volume didn't go up. The amount of people paying was around the same, But instead of people donating 1 cent, right, they had to pay $10. That was the difference here. But of course, the holy grail of this is microtransactions. What I really wanted to get into was microtransactions. You look at a company like Zynga, and you just say, yeah, I want to be them, right? So microtransactions. Again, not something I'm able to do myself, but with everybody else was partly one of the reasons we in our company, Player.io, decided that we probably should have a microtransaction API. And we released something, it's called Paywalls. It's basically, it does the integration for you. You have the account directly with PayPal or Facebook or Super Rewards, but we handle all the callbacks so you don't have to. So we just take care of the server infrastructure and put it into a nice micro-payment abstraction and have item management and all this stuff. Personally, I released with these 4 options as my payment options. I had Super Rewards, I had Kongregate, I had Gambit, and I had PayPal. And the first thing I did was just convert the game to Paywall. I just wanted to, make sure it got up and running, and made sure that all of it was working with the old model. And you can actually see it on the graph. You can see where I put in Paywall, because suddenly people were able to pay with SMS, or people could pay on Kongregate, or people could use offers. So revenue increased when I added more payment options. So that's, I think, a very interesting point. But again, I really wanted to do microtransactions. So the question was, what's the best model here? And I used Mafia Wars as my model, basically, for how I wanted to implement my microtransaction. And what it is, you have a free currency and you have a paid currency. And the free currency, which I called energy, you get over time. So every 2.5 minutes, you will get 1 free energy. And you can use the free energy to buy items in your shop, pretty much all of them, or you can short circuit it and skip ahead and use the paid currency called gems to buy the item directly. So people got a choice, and the first package I released with, I wanted to see, how much money can you get out of a user, right? So I released a $2 smiley, a $5 smiley, and a $10 smiley. And this was around Christmas, so I added a Christmas smiley in there. People were asking for it. And we put it online, and the very first feedback we got was, that's great, we want more. So basically what people, and I was sitting there, I hadn't built a system for this, right? Again, I'm just out to experiment. I'm not trying to build an infrastructure or anything. And so adding a new smiley would take like an hour at this point, because I was just testing. Everybody else is purely an exercise in figuring out what works here. So I decided, instead of me adding a $10 smiley, I'm gonna go crazy, right? I added a $50 smiley with a monocle on the top hat, And an hour later, we sold 7. It's the 16 times 16 pixel smiley that cost $50. Yeah, well, and to this day, I think we sold 68 or something like that. We have a few every day now that buys this smiley. But it just goes to show, if you have a multiplayer environment, a social context to put this into, how much money you can actually ask for. We have an internal joke right now that it's a misconception that microtransactions stands for small transactions, because there is you can easily charge $10. And if you actually go look at Zynga games, or go look at the people who are doing microtransactions, things are really expensive. You're not getting a lot for $10. It's basically, you might save a day's work or something for $10 if you're lucky, right? So looking at this is the old revenue graph as it looked before we added microtransactions, and this is the result. So first day we made, after releasing this, 3 smileys, 4 smileys after a few hours, was $1,152. Quite a difference. And of course, I think that's one of the most exciting times for me. Just going, wow, what happened there? How is this so different from having a beta? How is this? Why is this so much more, intriguing than having a simple beta model? And I think what it is that you gave people a choice. You gave people a choice. What is it that I want to invest my thing into? And we have the free system, so people could wait. People could decide, I don't want to do this right now. I can just wait a few days and get the smiley instead. I set up the model something like that you could use, if you used $1, was approximately 1 day. So you could wait a day and you can get the approximate same value as $1. And that's the model I have kept. I haven't played with that yet. Of course, this is extremely interesting. So I had Christmas vacation coming up here and decided to use a lot of time on it. This was, my girlfriend hated me because I was just sitting behind the computer adding stuff, playing around with things, trying to do, the offers, take the pro package, make it 50% off, see if I can make more money, basically doing the single game, which is, add something new all the time, making sure you have time limited offers, all of these things. And then I got back to work, Christmas vacation over, I had to actually sit down and start doing what I do on a day-to-day basis. So I basically stopped adding stuff. So revenue went down, and at least that's what I thought, right? My revenue went down. I stopped working on it, my revenue went down, and I was preparing this presentation, and I was going to stand up here and saying, the amount of effort put into the game is directly proportional with the amount of money coming out of it, right? But I realized that might be the case, but I couldn't prove it. Okay, I stopped working on the game, but maybe everybody got it in Christmas presents, right? So I didn't know what was going on. So even though I had to prepare this presentation, I was really, really busy. I took out, I think, 3 hours on my spare time, my free time on a Thursday, and added some more stuff. So this was directly a result of it. I think we just rounded $1,400, and the average is, again, daily right now is above $500 a day in revenue on this game. So very effective. There's a clear connection between how much effort I put into the game, how much new stuff I add to the game, and also just the fact that something new happens in the game. We get a spike every time we add something to the game. We don't have a notification system, which is stupid. Again, this is a spare time project. It's not something that I'm living off of. It's just something that happened. So we are missing a lot of stuff like email notifications when something happens, or you have more energy you can use. All of this stuff we don't have that. So it's purely via, I add something to the system, and all of these kids go around and inform each other about it and spread it into schools and these kind of things. So as I said, I implemented 4 different payment providers, right? So where's the money? Where's the value actually coming in? And the vast majority of the money for everybody edits is from PayPal. Basic credit card transactions, that's where we see the most money. It's 65%, 66% comes directly from PayPal. The second largest is Super Rewards, and honestly, I think it's because we don't have a direct mobile implementation in Play.io. They have to go to a third party to do mobile. From the transaction volume, I'm pretty sure that these transactions, or the transaction sizes, I'm pretty sure that these transactions are not done with offers. They're basically, people putting money in with their mobile phone. Then there's 11.16% coming from Kongregate. As I said, we have a Kongregate integration using their credit system, which is in beta. And of course, the amount of money I get out of that as a developer is less. I was lucky I got into the Kongregate beta payment program early, so I get 30%. I think it's 50% today. And then the last one is Gambit, Get Gambit. And most of the revenue there are things from the transaction sizes are basically people watching ads. They have, you can watch an ad and then you get a few cents out of it. And that's the money made there. So the recipe for success, at least for everybody edits, is I build a community. I build a separate website where this game is. If I look at the statistics, 60% of all the traffic on the game is coming from everybodyedits.com. So all the distribution of the game, basically, what it primarily does is it sends traffic back to my own website. And on that website, there's a forum. They have their own news feed, and they have their own, so it's a really hardcore community for people that's only playing Everybody Edits. And if you look at revenues for users, on the website and off the website. Somebody was asking me about this just before I had to go on stage here, and users on the website monetizes around 3 times as well. So there's 3 times as much money in the people on the website. Of course, the people on the website are also the largest fans. So I have a hard time, figuring out, what specifically is the reason why they're so much better. But there is a value in building your own community, building your own end destination. We also see average session times are much longer on our own website. And I think the reason for that is fairly simple. If I'm playing this game on a game community, entertainment is only 1 click away. So, I can be playing Everybody Edits, but over here there's an ad, for some other funny game, and I want to play that, so I click that, and I lose that session. So on this website, that's one thing. That's Everybody Edits. There's no ads. There's nothing distracting from the experience. Constant updates. The game grows every time we release something. We gain 1 or 2% in concurrent online users. We peak out at around 3,500 concurrent online in peak. Playing the game at the same time. It's multiplayer, which makes it as social as it can be, except for me sitting beside the people playing. You couldn't make anything more social than real-time multiplayer that is not involving me sitting beside somebody else. And I personally believe that that's the reason that you can sell the $50 smiley, right? Because I'm playing the game, and I can go show off that I have a $15 smiley in live environment and get feedback directly from users. There's a chat in there. So people can say, oh, wow, you got the, and that's the effect it has. If somebody has that smiley, everybody thinks that guy's cool, right? And that comes down to identity and persistence. People need to have an identity in your game. People need to have something that is there, something they can build, something that can make them feel special, right? And you need persistence. It needs to be a cross gaming session. It needs to be such that if I sit down and play the game, I get value out of playing the game over time. So and it is configured like that. The energy system there, which gives you free energy every 2.5 minutes if you're online or not online, adds value over time. So you're coming back, you need to refuel, so you get more of it the more you play it. And that leads directly to what sells. Basically, we have the stuff that sells the most for us. I think 70% of our revenue is from smileys. We have upgrades for the people who build the games. New game mechanics, new visual items that can build. We have something called a coin door. We have small coins in the game, like in Mario, and when you collect them, you can build a door that requires you to have, say 5 coins to be able to enter into it. And the sales of that is still much smaller than when we release a new smiley. And that makes sense because 10% of the users build games and 90% play them, right? So when you release a smiley, you target all of your target audience, but when you release a simple upgrade, you only target the people who are actually interested in an upgrade. The only thing we haven't played with yet, which I think could sell better than showing off, is power-ups. Giving people superpowers for 5 seconds, right? Being able to jump twice as high or something like that, which makes you able to somewhat cheat in the game. I said, I built this game myself. I haven't had any help with it, and that's not entirely true because we had a really, really great community. We pretty much all the updates that's been in the game for the last 2 months or 3 months has been something that's been suggested by the community. And of course, we have 60,000 players every day, so going through that community myself is not something I can possibly do. So what I did was I promoted free users to being admins, and they started out as just being people who moderated rooms. You can basically draw in this game, right? So you have dicks all over, and you kind of want to prevent that. So they started out as just people being able to close a room, just saying, no, that's not okay here, especially not with a game in this demographic, right? But it turned out that all these guys, really, really want to help. So we have a guy called Michael who is a graphic designer by trade, and he does, he's done graphics for the game in-game. He does video promotions and all this, but he does it for free because he really likes being part of the game. Actually, I have a video he created for the game. see if it will play here. Ooh, that's fun. Oh yeah. I depended on YouTube. That's probably not a good idea. Let's try reloading it. Here we go. So he basically made that because he thought it was fun, right? I don't think I could get better employees than that, you know. So one thing that was clear in that video is that the game has a chat, and when we initially added the chat feature, we had a lot of parents writing us saying, you know, everybody else was the best game ever because my 9-year, 10-year-old kid was able to play it without having to worry about, or us having to worry about other people on the game and, you know, bad language and all of the other problems that comes with running a product in this. And we sat down and we had a long talk about how do you solve this. And we came to the conclusion, we have been building communities for, I don't know, since 2004. So we have a lot of experience here. And what we, one of the takeaways we have there is that the only way to actually moderate chat is with moderators. You have to have people who do nothing but manage this, especially if you have kids on it. And we didn't want to have this in everybody else. We wanted something where we could have a game that was safe for kids, but still was able to have a chat. So we did the ultimate hardcore thing when it comes to chat. It's a credit card only paid feature. You have to pay with a credit card. You have to prove that you're an adult to chat in this game. Or that you have an adult approving of you chatting in the game, right? So if you're a kid, you need to get your parents' permission with a credit card to chat in the game. And it also has the advantage that if we have a misbehaving user, right, we know exactly who they are. There's no doubt about it, because there's a credit card transaction on that specific user with name and address and everything, right? Anyway, back to the admins. There's a guy called David who runs our fan forum, which is, I think they have, they just rounded, I actually don't know how many posts they have, but they have like 2,000 or 3,000 new posts every day. These guys are crazy, you know, they really, really love the game. And we have a guy called Toby who does a lot of help with web development. And these guys also do, you know, they help out with the product, right? They do moderation and closed room and all this, yeah. So, of course, you know, it's fine for me standing here saying, you know, you can build something like this in your spare time. And regarding that, I think on average over the last 2 months, I probably used 1 hour on this every day. Of course, sometimes I have a weekend, you know, I put in a lot of hours in a row, but approximately 1 hour. But of course, you know, me as a developer, you know, being the founder of a platform company is probably biased, right? I know our platform inside out. I know exactly what it can do. I know exactly where the limitations are. So when I sit down and develop something, you know, I'm not running into these things. So what I really want to show you is another game. It's called Shell Shock. It's a basic tank game. So you know, it's team-based. I'm on one team. There's another team. The goal is to kill the other guys, right? There's nothing special in this. It's comparable to Worms or Scorched Earth or any games in this genre. It's made by a guy called Kyle. He's 19 years old. He lives at home. And originally he was offered a very classical $8,000 sponsorship from Armor Games. And at this time, I was talking to Chris from Flash Game License, and he said, you know, this game is up on our portal. You should, you know, can you help distribute it? Because of course we want to make a success out of games on top of our platform. So he basically asked, you know, can you help me get this game out there. And I contacted the developer and said, hey man, that's cool. You know, great game you've done there. Have you thought about microtransactions? And he hadn't. And I showed him the numbers from Everybody Edits, and he basically decided to not go with the sponsorship, and his parents thought he was nuts, right? You know, the first game the guy releases, you know, he got $8,000 up front, you know, and you know, I think most parents would think, you know, my kid did really great there, right? But he decided not to do it. Additionally, he decided to have a very close beta. So if you want to play this game, you have 3 options right now. You can go play it on Shellshock Live, which is the end destination for it, because of course I recommended that he had an end destination for the game. You can play it on Nonova, which is our properties. We just put it there to give it some traffic, to do some testing. Or you can play it on Congregate.com, where most people are actually playing this game right now. But it's not out in open distribution yet. It's technically still in beta. So how much can a single guy do? He's studying computer science. He doesn't have a lot of spare time. Probably more than people with kids. But he's just an ordinary guy. And this is the revenue chart. He very humbly allowed me to pull his data and show it off here today. So you can see his initial release of the game and his initial beta. Then he put it on Congregate, and he immediately grew in revenue. That was a fairly huge win for him. You see the classical release, get a lot of traffic. It's in the new game session, right? And the traffic goes down again, but it's a good game, so it got featured on the front page. Traffic goes up again. And this was just, new cool games on Congregate. And his revenue went up to something like $250 a day, which I think is fairly decent. And then of course, Congregate is taking 50% of this, so there's 50% added on top of this. If this was traffic on his own website, he would have made, not $250 here, but $500 here, right? But of course, Congregate is making $250 out of this, so they put it on the front page and reveal featured. Makes sense. And he right now, I think his average for the last week or something has been just above $330 some. So he makes almost $10,000 on this game on his own. And he's one guy, building this game for the fun, sitting at home. And we have more people actually branching into this. We talk to a lot of developers building on top of our platform, and what we have decided as a company, as Play.io, is that we want to help people get started with this. We really believe that there is a lot of value for Flash game developers here. Something where we can help people in a lot of different ways. Initially, what we want to do, we want to help people with advice. We have a formula down now where we know pretty much what works and what doesn't work, especially in the male audience. So if you're building a game, a social game or a multiplayer game, and it doesn't have to be Play.io, we would love to talk, we would love to get your experiences and help you with this. I have an email. And secondly, and this is something we basically just agreed on, is that if what you need to get started is a small investment, we'll be happy to do this. Give you a few $1,000s to get started, and we want you to build a studio. We want you to have success. So we are not going to do it in a model where we take percentages of your company. We're basically just to say you're using Paywall. It's a prepayment on the money you're going to make. But if you have something cool, something you want to show off, something you think could be a huge success, but just need a kickstart, send me an email, and I'll try to help you out. Yeah, and I'm a little bit fast here, but I have one thing more I want to talk about, which is that I'm not a smart man, and the reason for that is going to be apparent in a moment. But basically, again, Play.io is for playing around. It's for having fun with. Everybody Edits. It's for having fun with, right? It's something. It's a pet project. It's something where we want to do crazy things that companies who has a long-time revenue investment in something probably wouldn't do. And one thing we did was we decided that it would be really funny if we had a smiley you could only get by sending us a postcard. Which is a fun idea. It's something it's a really old idea. You had like mailware in the very old days where you had to send a postcard to get a license key for something, right? And what we weren't realizing is that we had 2 million unique players a month, right? We released it Friday, I think, and the next Monday, get a knock on the door, and it's the postal guy going, "What are you guys doing?" This was the first batch. It doesn't look like much. I think there's 57 letters in there, and this was, the people who was able to send it on short term, right? There's no US traffic in here yet, we hoped the traffic volume will go down. It's not. It's going up. We'll probably have to pull this at one point, but I think we're just short of having 500 postcards now. It's really nice. It's a reminder that it's actually kids out there, right? We wrote in the description of this thing that we really like homemade postcards. So we get drawings from kids and small batches people have made, and a lot of game ideas and all kinds of crazy stuff in the mail, and it's a really good reminder that the people who are actually playing this game is kids. It's I've gotten handwritten letters from 6-year-olds. That try to figure out what their username is hard, but it's a really good reminder that what we're building here is a game for kids, and that it's actually real users out there. It's easy to sit back and think about them in forms of numbers and conversion rates and all of these kind of things. So yeah, that's it for now. Questions? No question. One question.
When you were showing the graph,
Yeah.
revenue, how is that relative to the popularity of the increasing?
It's a really good question. I haven't actually, from the top of my mind, I know approximately how much traffic the game has, and the game is growing right now with about 1 to 2% a month, and it's a fairly static growth. It has been on all the portals it can pretty much be on. So what's left now is social growth, right? So of course, the reason I'm able to have, if we just go up here, a spike like that on the right, is partly because during those 1.5 months in between, the game has grown a lot, right? The game, the thing I haven't mentioned is the game is of course built purely on Player.io, our platform, right? And it has a cost. It costs money to run it, right? And the cost of this game is per month is around $5,000 to run. But the game also makes $15,000 to $20,000, so it's still a $10,000 Flash game. But it is a very chatty game. Having 45 people running around in the same room in multiplayer is pretty much the worst thing you can do from a traffic perspective, right? If we look at a game like Shell Shock, who's quickly reaching the $10,000 a month goal as well, he pays around $500 a month to run his game on top of the platform. So yeah, and I haven't, from platform perspective, I haven't talked a lot about it, but we have a lot of really large clients. On Player.io, our primary clients are advertisement agencies, large game development studios who use the platform, if it's an advertisement agency, as a competitive advantage, because they can build multiplayer games or they can build social games faster than they could before, right? But I think the indie games is much more fun to talk about, right? Yeah, next.
And Chris,
Yeah.
repeat questions.
Yeah, sure, sorry.
You mentioned PayPal was your main revenue source.
Yeah.
Was there a lot of back-end work you could do, or was it something simple that PayPal offered?
Okay, yeah. The question is that my primary revenue stream is PayPal and the workload of this. And the answer to that is that today PayPal is a Player.io paywalled integration key. So the only thing you have to get PayPal up and running right now with Player.io is have a PayPal email. And from there, it's just a Flash API. It's something people can get up and running in, 10 minutes if you have the studio open already, right? So initially, of course, I had to get a developer sit down and code it, and PayPal is not the funniest thing to integrate with, but today all of this is handled by the platform, and that applies to all the different payment methods, to Kongregate, to PayPal, to Super Rewards, to all of these. They have a unified interface for you as a developer to work with that has a micropayment abstraction and an item abstraction and item security, so you don't have to worry about doing all of this, but you still have the account directly with the provider. So we are not taking a cut in the sense that we want 30% of your revenue or something like this. We just take a flat 5 to 3 cent or 3 to 5 cent cut every time you do a paid transaction, depending on what plan you are on Play.io. So it's something that's really, really simple, and adding more is trivial. Yeah. Yeah.
You mentioned that you're more of a front-end developer, so I was just wondering how simple it was to get in chat, synchronous multiplayer persistence, like traffic management and all that stuff. Like, how much of that is handled by Play.io, and how much did you have to outside help for?
Okay, the question is how much is in Play.io and how much do I have to custom develop? And the answer is that everybody just uses pretty much all the Play.io tools. It uses real-time. We have a real-time multiplayer API in Play.io, which is a real SDK. You download a package, build a real-time multiplayer game in any .NET language with breakpoint debugging on a local server, everything. When you're done, you just take that DLL, upload it to a server. That's how multiplayer is handled. That's how people are. We have for that specifically we have an API for listing all the instances of this type of room. So that's how the lobby looks, how the lobby works. We have storing of data, which is I have a account and I have a username and I have data attached to me, like what worlds do I own, or I have worlds. All of that is handled by our database solution called BigDB. So that's again handled. I don't have to worry about that as a client developer. We have Paywall, which handles all payment, all access management, which is a really, really large thing to building your own management system to handle items that has been bought and making sure it's secure and all of these things. Handled by Paywall. Hosting. If you build a multiplayer game, it's very, very important that you're able to update the client, right? Because if you update the backend, you need to make sure that the client is compatible. So we have a service called GameFS, which is basically CDN hosting, with a small wrapper file you upload instead of the game itself. And you can upload a new version to our service, and it will automatically be the one played everywhere. And then there's user handling users, logins, Kongregate integration, Facebook integration. That's one thing I haven't mentioned is that everybody else has a full-blown Facebook application. It's not a major success, which is why I didn't show it here. But basically, in Play.io, we have all the user authentication that you would ever need, and then we have a service called Sidebox, which allows you to have full-blown Facebook applications on top of the platform again. So from me as a client-side developer, I haven't had to touch much backend. The only thing I've done on the backend is I've sat down and have written a multiplayer server, or the callbacks on the server that handles, I got a message of this type, what should I do with it, send this out. That's the only thing I've done on the backend. The rest is today handled by Play.io. Yeah, the same applies to the game Shell Shock. He has all of it on Play.io. All of it is Play.io powered, and he's literally said he couldn't do it without Play.io. Him building that game is outside of the range of one developer if he didn't have the platform. More?
Do you have a friends feature?
If what?
Friends feature, so users have other.
No, we don't. No, okay, yeah. A common request from us. The question is, do we have a friend system? An integrated system for finding friends? And the answer is that we do not on the platform. What we do have is we have a pre-made presence server. Which is if you build games with Play.io, multiplayer games with Play.io, you can upload different server types to handle different tasks. And we have a pre-made example you can download with source code and everything, where you can have a presence system. So I can know who are my friends are online, and I can have a concept of friends. But it's not implemented into the service right now. It's a major feature request for us, and it's something we might consider doing. Play.io is basically it's built on feedback. If we have somebody coming to us saying, I need this, or if we have 10 people come to us and saying we need this, we'll basically sit down and build it. The same, I don't know if you saw, but we have Flash and we have Unity and we have .NET. .NET is obvious because we'd used .NET on the back end, but Unity wasn't obvious for us. And we basically had a client coming to us saying, I really want a Unity API. How much should I pay you to get it, right? So that API was built because somebody paid us a lot of money for it. Yeah. More? Yeah. Okay. First question is what's the maximum concurrent users we tested? And are we talking the multiplayer server or the database solution or for multiplayer? I don't think we have had a single game that runs more than 5,000 concurrent online so far. But we have, in stress test, we have exceeded 100,000. So the way we scale is that we shard rooms, basically. You know, we have an upper limit to how many people you can have in a single instance, and then we have a cloud infrastructure where we can just add more servers. So for us, you know, scaling from 5,000 to 200,000 is just about adding more capacity to the cluster. Yeah. The question is, what's the limit for a single instance? Right now, we have for the packages that are online, where you run your game on our server cluster, it's a hosted solution, is 45. But if you use Enterprise, you can get your own server cluster where there's no limitations. So you can do pretty much whatever you want with that. Yeah. The question is what backend? We run primarily .NET, Microsoft.NET. And if you build a multiplayer game, the backend is in .NET. Most people write their backend in C#. Yeah. More? Thank you.